If a flight is operating at night with low ambient light in the cockpit, it is good practice to increase the cockpit lights if lightning is anticipated, so that any flash does not blind the pilot. In order to understand how rods and cones respond to light, we need to look for a short time at the nature of light. The human eye can detect light of wavelength 400 to 700 nanometers. Light within this wavelength range is called visible light. You can see white light broken up into its constituent parts in a rainbow or through a prism. Compared to radio waves, visible light waves are minute. 1 nanometer is 1 meter to the power of -9, whereas FM radio waves are about 1 meter in length. Green light, for example, is 525 nanometers, that is 0.000000525 of a meter. It has been found that cones, which provide daylight or photopic vision, are most sensitive. That is, they produce the greatest electrical response to colour with a frequency of 555 nanometers, which is in the green to yellow range. In comparison, rods, for scotopic vision, have a sensitivity peak of 507 nanometers, which is at the lower end of green. If you look at the right-hand side bottom of the scotopic vision curve, you will see that it ends at about 610 nanometers, which is before the colour red wavelength. In other words, rods cannot detect red light, and so when one sight is adjusted to the dark, red light does not reduce this night-adapted vision. This is why you use a red torch light at night for walk-around checks. If you were to use a white torchlight, your night-adapted vision would take time to adapt again to the dark after you put out the white light. As an aside, skies appear blue because sunlight is scattered off the molecules of the atmosphere. This scattering, called Rayleigh scattering, is more effective at short wavelengths, which is the blue end of the spectrum. The larger the angle between the observer and the sun, the bluer the colour. Clouds, on the other hand, contain much larger molecules, and light scattering is independent of wavelength, producing achromatic or white colours. If the air is clear, sunsets appear red, because the light from the sun has passed a long distance through the air and some of the blue light has been scattered away. If the air is polluted with small particles, natural or otherwise, the sunset will appear redder, whilst the salt in the air above the sea will cause orange sea sunsets. We saw earlier that there are 3 types of cones, each sensitive to a different colour of light: red, blue and green, depending upon the proteins, called opsins, which coat the cones and make them sensitive to a particular wavelength or colour. The opsins are coded by 3 genes on the X or male chromosome. Defects in one or more of these genes can cause colour blindness. Up to 8% of males may suffer from these defects, whereas only 0.5% of females do, although they may be gene defect carriers. The defect is usually the absence of either a green or a red pigment gene, which causes an inability to distinguish between red and green. Mutated genes may cause moderate colour blindness. Blue gene defects are uncommon, and it is very uncommon to be unable to distinguish any colours. However, such total colour blindness is a bar to a flying licence. The test for colour blindness is the Ishihara test, which involves trying to identify a number made up of coloured dots within a circle of other coloured dots. See if you can make out the numbers in these circles, but remember that these are not medical standard pictures. We have seen that one's vision can be either peripheral, where the object is not in central focus and is primarily detected by the rods, or central vision, where the object is on the axis of vision and the light from the object is directed to the fovea, where the very sensitive cones provide a highly focused image. The measure of one's eyesight is called visual acuity. It is one's ability to discriminate objects at varying distances. An individual with an acuity of 20/20 should be able to see at 20 feet that which the so-called normal person can see. It is sometimes expressed in meters, which is 6/6 vision. Normal vision is usually found on the next to last line on the chart. 20/20 does not mean perfect vision. It simply means standard vision. A person with 20/15 vision can see at 20 feet what a normal person can see at 15 feet. If one's vision is worse than standard, for example, one can only see at 20 feet what a normal person sees at 25 feet, then this is classified as 20/25 vision. The familiar optician's card test is called the Snellen test. This diagram shows how, away from the fovea, the clarity of the object decreases rapidly. At as little as 5 degrees from the fovea, the acuity drops to 20/40, and at 25 degrees, it drops to 20/200. If we compare this diagram to that for rod and cone density on the retina, you will see a striking similarity, because it is the cones which provide high-definition messages to the brain. So, although humans have a field vision of about 200 degrees, acute vision is governed by the fovea, and this means an acute vision angle of about 2 degrees. It is therefore vitally important that a pilot scans his whole field of vision. 2 degrees represents roughly 2 thumbs at arm's length. Use the mouse to move the warrior to illustrate how visual acuity worsens as the aircraft moves from central vision to peripheral vision. Apart from focusing, there are many factors which can affect acuity. Click on the notebook on the screen to view these. The point on the retina where the optic nerve enters the eyeball has no covering of rods or cones. Any image falling on this point will not be detected. This is known as the blind spot. This has great significance when considering the detection of objects which are on a constant bearing from the observer. If the eye remains looking straight ahead, it is possible for a closing aircraft to remain in the blind spot until a very short time before impact. To demonstrate to yourself the existence of the blind spot, look at this picture with your left eye closed. Now move towards the screen, keeping your right eye focused on the cross. The aircraft will disappear, then reappear, as the image crosses the optic nerve. A second blind spot can exist at night. As we saw earlier, the fovea contains only cones, which are ineffective in poor light. As it is the rods which provide night vision, and these are located outside the fovea, one can obtain a clearer image at night by looking about 10 degrees off-centre. Try this yourself by looking at the stars on a dark night. If you look slightly off-centre, you may see a star more clearly than if you centre it in your field of vision. Move the red circle with the mouse to show the effect of looking directly at stars at night. Add to the 2 blind spots other obstructions, such as windscreen pillars, and a pilot's situational awareness can be reduced considerably. In order to avoid these blind spot problems, a pilot should continuously move his head to scan the sky and sectors, overlapping each other by 10%.